Welcome to Cyber Synapse. Today I'm joined by Nicole Dawson-Cullinan, and Nicole is a classic homeopath. She's a functional health practitioner. She's the creator of Wellness International, and we are going to get into a number of beautiful conversations based on what we've just done off camera. So first of all, Nicole, thank you for coming and having this time with me. I'm really interested in why you do what you do, and also for the listeners and viewers, what is a homeopath? Because it's a job title that comes with a lot of ridicule if people don't understand it. So yeah, welcome, and start with whichever question you want to.
Thanks, Kath. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the opportunity to share. So I guess my journey into wellness, or the wellness model of health, began in the 90s when I studied homeopathy. And so that was a starting point for me. And I was young and idealistic. I had a interest in psychology and dietetics, but neither direction really satisfied my my desire for sort of being involved in a holistic system. So I grew up in South Africa, and South Africa in the 80s and the 70s was really, there was a lot of backdrop to a lot of revolutionary change, and it was really, that's when I came of age. And I basically, yes, I came of age in a time where there was a regime change. And in that chaos, I think that a lot of systems in health were allowed to flourish where they weren't necessarily accepted or allowed to flourish in other parts of the world or in other first world countries. So it was a kind of a petri dish where we were quite isolated because of international sanctions, and at the same time, on the tip of Africa, the location is isolated as well. So I feel like there wasn't a stigma so much with homeopathy, and it had been banned, but it also was allowed to flourish alongside chiropractic, aromatherapy, reflexology, and those types of allied health fields. Yeah. So it was really only maybe in the 2000s that my colleagues and I really sensed that there was a fairly well orchestrated international drive to discredit homeopathy. And actually I got to the point where I thought, this is not me. I'm not a homeopath. In fact, I don't want to be a homeopath. And I moved away from homeopathy for many years. And I really felt like I'd wasted, 6 years of study and years of practice. And it was only through my patients who encouraged me to continue. I mean, they were confounded as to why are you giving up? And I guess, yes, I got sick of being, you introduce yourself at a social gathering or a party, and you get this response where people go, So my husband and I, my husband's a chiropractor, so we'd go home and we'd laugh afterwards and say, well, we're the doctors, because that's the reaction that people give you.
Yeah.
You go, I'm a homeopath and he's a chiropractor. Now what? And then the response is either, just people feel like you either the mixture of a heretic and a charlatan, or you have the opposite extreme where people have had amazing results and they just think that they put you on a pedestal.
Yeah.
So it's I found it a very difficult role to sustain. And then I had my own personal health challenges with burnout, and that is how I discovered and led into functional medicine. And through doing the tests and using the model of functional medicine, I managed to get myself functional again. And I also, I started to marry some of the tenets of homeopathy with some of the tenets of functional medicine. And so essentially, you know, the overlap is that both systems, although they're they're unique, both systems are focus on personalization. And so, you know, that is something that I was already doing with homeopathy. So it came really naturally when I started to use the tools that functional medicine gave me. And the other tenet is that, you know, the body of both of them is that the body has self-healing ability. You know, you give the right ingredients, you plant the person in the right environment with, you know, the good food and more nourishment that a system needs, and you have health. So, you know, functional medicine terms it regenerative medicine, but homeopathy just uses the term of the body has self-healing ability. And so there were quite a few overlaps, which made the ability for me to marry the two systems fairly intuitive and fairly it just came naturally.
I mean, I noticed that with I'm going to use a qualitative statement here, and it's a bit of a quantifier. Good functional health practitioners also kind of work with, as actually, as I discussed with Shania, that tribal approach of, I can't do everything myself, so I'm going to outsource here and outsource there. So you've already got in-house the functional medicine principles alongside your homeopathy, and then that means that this person's also getting much more of a holistic approach with you, rather than just using just functional medicine. And I'm doing that air quotes thing, that just functional medicine approach, because we need a bit more than just one perspective. It's you know, horses for courses, but actually you need a multidisciplinary approach.
Yeah, and I see that with some of my medical colleagues, where they've kind of moved over to using functional medicine, but the mindset is still very much systems-based and separate systems. And so I really find that for them, they have to almost work at that holistic sense of, you know, helping the person might require a whole community of therapists and, you know, needing a few different therapeutic skills. But I guess where I come from, it's always been the opposite, where I've always felt and known that the holistic model is just so encompassing, and that's what we need. We need reconnection with all these separate parts, and because we are really just one system. And so yes, I mean, I think that's where I've now that I've moved from South Africa to the Netherlands and not in a full-time clinical practice anymore, I've been struck by how the mindset is one of, you know, it's more of a disease mindset. And so I guess my new mission is not really homeopathic or functional medicine per se, but more wellness mindset education, to try to get the public more aware that there actually are more options in health, and that they really, you know, people aren't going to make different choices if they don't know they have more options. So I'm really trying to plant seeds in people's minds so that they can ask those questions, and we can try to turn the tide and create a more integrative model of medicine that serves more people. Especially, you know, we have, I think the biggest problem that we have at the moment is this pandemic of chronic illness. And, you know, the big thought leaders in functional medicine like Jeffrey Bland are saying things like there's a pandemic within the pandemic. You know, the COVID pandemic is basically just the tip of the iceberg. We need to be looking deeper and looking at the pandemic of chronic illness, which is, you know,
So yes, and I did see the article. I've not read all of it actually, so I'm going to hands up and say, yeah, I'm supposed to do that as a researcher, but I haven't actually gone all the way through it. This is something that's come out of much of the literature in terms of psychotherapy, counselling, psychology, is that the pandemic that I suppose we're looking at is, we would call that systemic trauma. You know, that there's systemic trauma, and the trauma leads to those chronic illnesses, and chronic illnesses are because of the traumas of political issues, you know, right the way across the world. We've got financial issues, we've got socio-economic issues, we've got food issues, we've got transport issues. Everything seems to be about the human race at the moment is struggling as a whole. And I'm wondering actually if it's a bit of a meta view actually, that COVID has given us that moment to sit down and think, we've got a world crisis. We are, you know, creating problems for the planet. So the planet is also suffering trauma based on, you know, what we as a species are doing. So yeah, I'm massively in support of this pandemic within the pandemic phraseology, and I like the fact that Jeffrey Bland brought it out in functional medicine.
Yes.
And for me, there's the thing about, I think other professions, other areas, other roles are beginning to talk about the same thing, but we all call it something different, perhaps.
Yeah, so maybe the language that people are using is different, but essentially, so a wellness mindset really doesn't really matter whether we're talking about health or environment or business. To me, it's a way of looking at things as a sort of a systems ecology, and so I think it struck me moving from a third world country, or a third world country with first world elements, to Europe, and it struck me that actually there's such disconnection with nature that to me was the root of a lot of continued trauma, you know, because I think if you know, something goes wrong, it might not be something that was even within your control, but the way you continue along a certain path can continue to perpetuate, you know, the effects of trauma. So to me, it's about reconnection, and I guess that's what I did in terms of helping heal my own burnout. You know, it was about basically living in alignment with myself again, living in flow. And living in alignment with yourself is basically just sort of a microcosm of living in alignment with the bigger picture, you know, our world, our environment, our macrocosm. So yes, I think this wellness mindset for me is bigger than homeopathy. It's bigger than functional medicine, and it certainly has the power to heal a lot of broken systems in business, and you know, and so yes. So I think that the maybe one of the biggest problems that we are dealing with now, that COVID has highlighted, is this pandemic of chronic illness. And now, how are we going to fix it? And fixing the chronic illness in humans, I think, also would require looking outside of ourselves and fixing our food systems, our, you know, the way business is done, the capitalist sort of constructs that run health, for instance. And just looking at the environment and looking at where is this biodiversity going, and the loss of species, and you know, the extinction of so many species at the moment. So for me, the big focus has been one with reconnection with nature, in order to heal the internal trauma, if you want to call it that.
Absolutely. And for those who are listening, I have been nodding ferociously whilst you've been talking, going, yes, this is the way, this is the way. And it's so important that as human beings we start to go from that. I'm just thinking, Ken Wilber's probably got the best terminology for this, from being egocentric to world-centric. If we begin to think about what we are doing, the impact we're having on our ecosystems, on the planet, for each other, you know, building compassion, empathy, connection. Those are the things that also provide that nurture environment for the healing to take place. And I think what we have had is, you know, Mother Nature's kind of gone, okay, you lot, you've misbehaved far too long. You're really not helping each other. You're becoming, you know, very, very self-centered and egocentric driven. Okay, I'm going to give you a lesson. For me, there's something about, I think that's where we are as a species, and perhaps, you know, it does sound a little bit woo-woo.
Yeah.
But, you know, Mother Nature kind of went, oh, all right. You know, like a mum does, where she goes, okay, you lot, enough mess, tidy up now.
Yeah. It makes me think of Jane Goodall. I've been following her on Facebook, and she's having these master classes at the moment, and she really kind of sort of is telling the world that, you know, what have we been doing, and we've got to stop it now. And so I think of her when it comes to you know, the need for environmental reform, and she's like this grandmother when it comes to you know, she's been doing it her whole life, and now she's sitting back and kind of going, I told you so. And you know, we have to fix this somehow.
Yeah, and I think if you take that functional medicine principle of mitochondrial Eve, we are driven by a very female force. And sometimes I think that actually that's what it is. It would be a female that would come forward and say, right, okay, now enough is enough. So, you know, to use the phrase of Mother Nature, I think that we as a species need.
So, but for me, because I suppose growing up in very racially polarized situation, I'm always very alert to polarization. And so I honestly feel like the healing for us as humans and our planet potentially is through integration of you know, the masculine with the feminine per se, because they both have value, and one without the other is out of balance. So to me, it's about integration, and that's always been the challenge for me with health as well, is to say, well, we have crisis care in medicine, and it's extremely necessary. In fact, you know, you broken arm, car accident, trauma, you know, there are situations where you need crisis medicine, and but on the other hand, it's this I guess, pandemic of chronic illness that is not served by the crisis care mindset. And so I think people would be so much better served if the medical model could be more integrative and allow for crisis care to happen in crisis care situations, but not to kind of treat an inflammatory problem with a crisis care mindset. So integration, and I think is key on all levels for healing.
Absolutely. So in trauma theory, we talk about the fragmentation, and for me, that's exactly what the society is at the moment. Is we are so fragmented that integration is bringing it back into the whole, the gestalt, and you know, and I think for me, coming from the perspective that I have, where I'm moving into functional medicine to kind of bridge the gap between the kind of mental, biopsychosocial, I'm now kind of going, okay, and we need this other level of basically all of the parts. I can't fix a clock if I only have some of the parts.
Yes.
So not that I'm making my patients and clients sound like clocks, but for me, you have to have a fully collaborative system that works together cohesively, and the only way you can do that is by making sure that all of the parts are well oiled, maintained, run together, they run smoothly, that the cogs actually intertwine, and etc. etc. So when I'm talking to my patients and clients, I talk about that, and I say, so if you've got a cog that's got broken teeth on it, you're not going to work as well as you could if you had all of these parts. And I was thinking,
because we are a complex system, so you need a complex solution. And you know, sometimes it's definitely more work to work with a complex solution or a number of solutions. But so I can understand that for simplicity's sake, people yearn for the magic bullet, or just to kind of simplify so that people, you know, take one medication and it fixes everything, but
Mm-hmm.
the reality is complexity, and that is why, you know, functional medicine and epigenetics and nutrigenomics basically explain a lot of that complexity
Yes.
and help us to focus our interventions for the individual, so that someone doesn't have to do everything and then become overwhelmed and give up, or, you know, not make headway.
Yeah, I wonder if that's been the pressure that individuals have felt as practitioners, you know, whether you're the homeopathist or, you know, acupuncturist, whether you're a psychotherapist or whatever. I wonder if we felt that we're the ones that are supposed to have the magic tool. And I know from talking to colleagues, this is quite common, that we felt that we're supposed to have the answers, and rather than being consciously incompetent and saying, actually, I don't know about that area, so I need somebody to assist me. So my clients get sent all over the place. I'll send them off for massages, I send them off to go and see an acupuncturist, to go and see a homeopathist, aromatherapist. Whatever that person seems to be needing is where I will say, you know, not only do you work with me in this session, you need to do this other stuff to make sure that your body's getting that full complex
Attention.
healing. Yeah, because I also see at the other end of the spectrum, and I don't know if you kind of notice this, that we're also pushing for this optimal health. And what I do see is that narrative that's driven by a lot of the biohacking community, and I'm using the biohacking community because it's a well-known community to talk about this.
Yes.
They're the A-driven, well, A-type personalities, which I don't usually do diagnoses, but we'll just stick with that terminology for the minute because I think people understand it.
Yeah.
They're the ones who want to be the outliers. They're the ones who want to have this absolutely critical optimal health, and I'm not sure that's even achievable. So I like this word that you use, wellness.
Yeah, I think that essentially, you know, we have to take into account human nature, and, you know, human nature is diverse, and, you know, you will have the outliers and the early adopters, and then you have the sheep, and then you have people that just resist change and resist anything new, and there's a lot of fear associated. And so I think this is actually human nature, and and that is where I feel the personalization process is very appropriate, because then you don't force anybody to do things that they don't want to do or feel comfortable doing, or actually can do. So, you know, this is also about being mindful of people's readiness for change, readiness to heal. And then, you know, I think some people do need all those extra tools or therapies or supportive or self-help biohacking strategies. I think for me, it's really just about being aware that it, you know, it might be the easiest approach to search for that one magic bullet, because it's human nature not to struggle or not to want to struggle. But sometimes
it's uncomfortable. People
you know,
don't like to be.
And I get that. I've been out of my comfort zone now for some time, and I chose it, which makes it worse. You know, so I think maybe for people where they're forced out by forces beyond their control, maybe it's a different dynamic. But I think that being out of your comfort zone is obviously a growth. If you see it that way, you know, it can be a growth zone. And to me, it's been a challenge to accept the struggle as well, and not try to diagnose it away or medicate it away, or talk it away, for instance. It's really just a process to just follow and be an observer, and just network and share, and so many other people are really feeling exactly the same way.
And for me, I think that's where James Maskell's approach comes in really nicely, because he talks about, you know, he doesn't use the word communitas, he tends to use the word community, and I'm more about, you know, when you can get communitas, which is that feel, that that feeling that you get when you're in a community, and it's a feeling of belonging and knowing, and a little bit more than saying I
Acceptance.
belong to a community. And he talks about, this is the way of healing. And so many trauma therapists will say, so I'm known for saying you can't talk your way out of trauma, and I've trained in talking therapy, but what I realized is it's much more than that. So there has to be this other element. And this idea of trauma therapies will say healing takes place in relationships. Well, absolutely it does, because that's who we are as a species. And and that's taking the perspective of mammals rather than saying humans.
Yeah.
We are a set of human beings that
Yeah.
need to be in connection with each other, and we need to have that
Mirror,
conversation, but
maybe.
also, yeah, we need to have the matched energies and the knowingness and all of those, the unconscious processes which nobody can quite get their finger on to say what they are. But for me, that's the part about being human, is this consciousness that drives us to be in connection with each other. And I think that is probably the linchpin of all of these different approaches, because I suspect when you're working as a homeopathist, you're not giving somebody a vial and saying, right, go away and take that. You're talking to them, you're asking them questions, and you're getting in connection with them.
In fact, I would say in my very early days, one would obviously, as a new practitioner who's obviously trying to gain confidence, one would do a lot of prep and go down, take extra care to choose the correct remedy for this patient, and then would be surprised by sometimes the lack of results. And over the years, I started to experience the opposite, where I didn't really, in terms of choosing a remedy, I was less caught up on the details and more just went with the flow, and then results were different. So it really, I think it's about the connection that you make with that one other person, that actually is the point at which the healing starts. And then whatever else you add to it along the way basically just keeps them on that path, keeps the momentum, and keeps them going forward. And I think it's quite a creative meeting, because it's been quite a interesting process for me, because I never really considered myself an artistic person my whole life. It took me being transplanted and being desperate to try to get my life back and my health back. It took me that to discovering myself as a creative person. And so I think, you don't have to think of the people that are the artists and the dancers and the, I think creativity comes in many forms, and for me it was using my skill set around nutrition and being a mother, and also just feeling this intense urge to reconnect with nature again.
Yeah.
And nature in itself is creative. So I think that a lot of healing happens with a creative process in mind, whether it's something you're doing consciously, or whether it's just something that just happens.
So would you be comfortable to talk about your process in terms of what you said there about being transplanted, about the creative process? And I was thinking about, so who were these healing people within your life? Obviously, if you're comfortable to talk about that, Nicole.
Yes, I think I've always been extremely independent. And then my husband is a chiropractor, and so him and I were a very strong team, both in business and both as a marriage. So I would say probably he's been my greatest supporter and my greatest mentor over the years, and the rest I've just kind of gone it alone most of the time, because I've always had quite different ideas, studying to be a homeopath, that just, that set me apart right when I was 18. So yeah, that's me. And so I think what I was surprised to find was that when one is transplanted and you strip away your career and your identity that you have in a particular place, or the identity that is associated with a certain place, you really are left with the core of who you are, and that can be quite a discovery, and that can also be quite scary. And so I discovered this creative person and started to use cooking and creating wholesome meals for my family using color as part of my healing process. And then that basically gave me such sort of, it was my dopamine, what you call a dose, or every time I made a brilliant, what I thought was a meal that was tasty, colorful, and everyone enjoyed, I was like, wow, okay, let's take a photograph of this.
Yeah.
And so that kind of propelled me into just amateur photography, and but essentially further along the line, it propelled me into creating content to inspire and empower other people, so that you don't have to, because I think that with functional medicine, there's a price tag, and a lot of people don't know about it in South Africa, the whole world, but particularly in Europe.
Yeah.
And with homeopathy, there's another association where people think it's a bit too fringe. So I was thinking, well, I feel like I've got so much experience to share, and I don't want to scare people away with homeopathy and this unknown functional medicine entity. So that is how, my focus on wellness became so inspiring for me. And so, it was really just a process of dealing with my own inner demons and using creativity and using reconnection with nature to find peace with the process, and then to also reach out and share and make connections outside, particularly around other mothers that were also transplanted, that had health issues with themselves and their families. And so basically, I always kind of repeat to people over and again how, if food is your medicine, then, you're starting with the pharmacy in your kitchen and your garden. And as a mother, not all mothers like to be cooking, but, there are obviously all sorts of convenience tricks that one can use. But if you commit to the idea that, food can be medicine, then that unites us, because we all have to eat.
Yeah. So I'm quite interested in asking you about how. So first of all, I know that we talked off camera about, and there's so much we could go through, and I'm just thinking, Nicole, that
just focus.
So many questions I want to ask. That what you were looking at was motherhood, and this idea of burnout, which is often associated with that drive to be the perfect mother, isn't it? The one who has to work, clean, cook, and do all of the other duties.
The super mom.
Yeah. So do you want to talk a little bit about what you do in terms of the burnout and how you help mothers and what it is that you do? Because,
Well, I think the most important thing is for people to recognize that burnout comes in many forms. So a lot of people go, well, I'm not burnt out, so that's not me. But burnout comes in many forms, and it often manifests itself as a thyroid problem, or depression, or chronic pain, or chronic viral infections, sleeplessness, hormonal problems. So, when you mention all those types of illnesses, people go, but that's me, but that's me, but that's me. So, so burnout is the extreme manifestation, and it's often associated with men in the workplace. Yes. So a lot of the sort of literature and research out there is associated with men in the workplace. So for me, I felt that, because of my personal experience, I felt like this burning desire to really help women recognize if they are at risk. And so the women that are at risk, you know, they don't even have to be mothers, but they're generally your high achievers.
Yeah.
So, and high achievers tend to take too much on, and obviously, you know, push, you know, your A-type personality, you know, pops its head up again. So I think that's been my approach, has been to say, well, try to recognize these signs before they manifest as a full-blown burnout.
Yeah.
And the other thing, so what I would do is obviously help people know themselves, know what their stresses are, know what their triggers are, know the individual chinks in their armor, you know, using the epigenetic profiles that are available, and the functional biomarker tests. So, you know, those are all tools that can give us more clarity as to how to focus for that person, their lifestyle, a new lifestyle, or create like a bespoke protocol for them. So yes, I think that the thing about burnout and motherhood is that since women have entered the workplace, they have now been having two roles, and that would be managing the home and having the career on the side. So we're at a point now where most of us realize we can't do it all the time, and at that, you know, high level. So it's something has to give, and usually it's the mother's health or the woman's health that gives.
I think I used to see that there were two approaches, weren't there? There was, you did your motherhood first and then your career, or you did the career and then the motherhood. But over the last, I'm going to say probably 20 years, I think that's where this dual role, you know, mother and career.
So it's a balancing act. So it's, in fact, it's both a balancing or a juggling act and a marathon. You know, so I kind of use that analogy of, like, you know, I can't even juggle. So, you know, for me, it's like, why do people even try to juggle all these things? And then at the same time, you know, you have this motherhood that starts with day one when you bring the baby home, or maybe, you know, the baby in the belly, and it ends when, like 50 years later. So it really is a marathon. And if you want to have the vitality and the resilience to enjoy your family and your kids and your grandkids, then one has to really be mindful of this marathon and conserve your own vitality. It's as selfish as that. In fact, that's probably the big thing, is that it boils down to, it's like, you know, it's put that oxygen mask on your mouth before you attend to the needs of your family and your colleagues and your pets and your, you know, all the dependents in your life. It's you know, when you sit in the airplane and they read out that safety message, that's essentially the best analogy for recovering, helping mothers recover from burnout, is the concept of securing your own oxygen.
Yes. And do you find, because I know I certainly do in therapy, that women find that message really difficult, because it's almost like they've never been, if you like, allowed to put themselves first. The societal message is, you know, children first, pets first, husband first, job first, and the idea of saying, okay, you need to turn this 180 degrees is really quite shocking for a lot of women.
I think it feels selfish. It feels selfish, and that goes against the instinct, the woman's instinct of being the nurturer, the caregiver, and the self-sacrifice that goes along with those very deep archetypal type roles. So I think we're up against what society has told us, what our role models have told us, and then we're up against what's instinctive. And some of us are maybe a little bit more tuned into that. I think we have a whole new generation of kids where there's a lot of or let's call it dual sexuality, and I'm very interested to know how these roles are going to affect families down the line. You know, and this flexible sexuality and the roles being more flexible. I mean, I can only hope that it's a healing evolution, but one doesn't know.
I think in terms of what where my head went just then as you said that was there is something about that is more accepting. There's less disintegration. There's less of that black and white polarity that you talked about earlier, in terms of that's what conceptual whole is, isn't it? It's the amalgamation of, as I'm now actually going to use a term from Dan Siegel, it's integrated and differentiated. So all roles work together, all roles work apart. And you know, for me, there's something about, I think society is now changing in terms of we're going to have this allowance. Because I know it certainly took me till I was my late 30s before I dropped this role of others first, myself second, because that was the message given. And yet I had the drive to be that perfect person, and yeah, it was impossible. It was absolutely impossible.
I think the high achieving perfectionists are the ones that are at greatest risks. And if you happen to have a really robust system and you happen to have vitality, then you will push it until the nth degree.
Yeah.
It's those, it's often like, so for instance, I burnt out relatively early, and it's because you know, in the epigenetic sense, I'm a canary in the coal mine, and I didn't know it at that point. And so, you know, I was forced to make changes at a relatively young age. And but I know for some people that have a lot more, you know, robust genetic or epigenetic makeup, less challenge, you can push it longer, but eventually it catches up.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's where self-awareness, I think this is the journey of self-awareness, isn't it? Is it sometimes takes people that extra mile to work it out. I'm just thinking about what Corinna said the other week, that it's this idea of we can show these people their issues, we can give them advice, but people have to come to their own conclusion in their own time. And when you were talking about it earlier, I was thinking about the coach that once said to me, so how long has that client been in therapy? And I said, I've got some that are in 6 weeks, they do the work, they're out, they're gone. And others take years.
Yeah.
Years? You know, her eyes nearly popped out. Years, Kath, years? And I said, yes, because some people take years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how it is. There's no rushing self-awareness and self-development.
Yeah. I think it's, you know, the two things there are the readiness to readiness to heal, which is also, I suppose, about being open to being teachable and learning and able to look at yourself critically. So yeah, that is something where timing is everything.
Permissions. I also think there's permissions as well, isn't there? And I wonder actually if that's a better word to explain the new kind of sexuality. Actually, there's more permissions now to be that human, to take that time to heal in the way that you need to at your own pace, personalized.
Yes.
Yeah. I think we will see the impact of that as we come out of lockdown for the entire world. People will have their own healing journeys from this particular community trauma, worldwide community trauma.
Yeah, I think what scares me the most is the mental health fallout, and whether, you know, where that takes communities. Whether the communities themselves have the inherent support structures to manage it, or whether it causes a bit of you know, self-destruct. So that's what I suppose personally, I mean, and my half of me is still in South Africa, so you know, it's like I still have maybe 2 limbs missing because they're there. And so that's why I can see how the first world lockdown has worked in a certain way, but the imposition of first world lockdown in third world countries is a recipe for disaster, health and mental health. So
yes, absolutely.
Let's just hope that there are some inherent safety nets and structures that keep people from self-destruct.
Yeah, so do I actually. I share the same kind of fears there, in terms of, you know, and I know that mostly the mental health model in this country follows pretty much that medical model, which is find the cure. You know, it's that diagnose, medicate, that's the cure.
The label and then the magic bullet.
Yeah, which you know, that worries me about what I will see as a therapist in years to come. because, you know, we know that actually it's that approach of being compassionate, caring, empathic, taking the time to find, you know, what it is that this person may need. And that's that holistic approach that we were talking about right at the very beginning when we started this conversation. So yeah, I do.
I think it's a kind of, there's this new term that I came up with recently and I just love it. It's called a chaordic system. And it was, I think, coined by the founder of Visa. And it's basically the combination of chaos and order.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and the link between the chaos and order is how creativity helps to sort of toggle between those two extremes. And so I'm hoping that out of this chaotic time that the world has been involved with, that individual communities will be able to use their own resources and creative processes to toggle between the chaos and create order and create stability again and health.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a wonderful place to finish, actually, Nicole. That was lovely what you've just said there. So I think that's a beautiful place to stop. So, you know, thank you so much for your time and your compassion and your conversation today.
Thank you, Kath. I loved it.
I know we said we were going to talk about other things when we started, and we've not gone anywhere.
I can't remember what we said we were going to talk about. It's just been a whirlwind.
We've meandered, but actually we've naturally and organically meandered into, yes. I think, what was a beautiful conversation. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Take care.